Coming up on today's Airborne, another glimmer of hope. The General Aviation Pilot Protection Act is proposed. ICAS files amicus brief in support of the EAA suit against the FAA. And Washington State federal delegation to Boeing, Washington is the best place for the 777X. Welcome to Airborne on Aero-TV. I'm Ashley Hale. As we are wrapping up today's episode of Airborne, our newsroom got a late-breaking story. Jim Campbell is here to report.
Thanks, Ashley, and hi, folks. We've got some breaking news for you, and it's kind of cool, too. Make a long story short, Textron Airland's Scorpion aircraft has just flown, completed its first flight today, Thursday, at 10:30 a.m., out of Wichita, Kansas. Basically, this is a joint venture between Textron Airland and Airline Enterprises to produce a flying prototype of the Scorpion intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance strike aircraft. Completed the first flight at McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita today, conducted a range of handling maneuvers for approximately an hour and a half. Today's flight marks one of the fastest developments of a U.S.-built tactical jet, progressing from initial design to first flight in less than 24 months. Scorpion's test flight was crewed by pilot Dan Hinson, an engineering test pilot with over 5,000 hours in 79 different types of aircraft, and co-pilot David Sitz. The flight was completed according to plan, said Hinson. Having flown many tactical aircraft throughout my 23-year career with the U.S. Navy and other aircraft manufacturers, I can say that the Scorpion compares very favorably to more costly aircraft currently used for low-threat missions. It showed impressive stability and responsiveness, closely matching all the predicted parameters for today's maneuvers. It's going to be a highly capable aircraft for the ISR and Homeland Security mission set. The Scorpion was announced as a demonstration aircraft in September of 2013, designed to accommodate U.S. budget constraints and shifting mission requirements for the U.S. Department of Defense and U.S. partner nations. Powered by twin turbofan engines generating 8,000 pounds of thrust, the Scorpion transitions easily between low speed and high subsonic speeds as needed for diverse missions such as irregular warfare, border patrol, maritime surveillance, emergency relief, counter-narcotics, and air defense operations. The Scorpion has a cruising speed of up to 450 knots with a ferry range of 2,400 nautical miles. The aircraft carries an internal payload of up to 3,000 pounds as well as wing-mounted precision munitions. For the Aero-News Network, Airborne and Aero-TV, I'm Jim Campbell.
A group of lawmakers has decided to try and force the FAA to do what it clearly did not want to do, namely free many private pilots of being required to hold a third-class medical certificate. The purpose of the bill is to, quote, direct the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration to issue or revise regulations with respect to the medical certification of certain small aircraft pilots and for other purposes, end quote. The bill proposes to allow pilots to use a valid state driver's license in place of the traditional medical certificate if there is no compensation for the flight. The flight is VFR only at or below 14,000 feet MSL. Speed is no faster than 250 knots, and the aircraft has no more than 6 seats and no more than a 6,000-pound gross takeoff weight. The bill also requires the FAA to prepare and send a report to Congress detailing the impact of the bill's passage on general aviation safety within 5 years of the bill's enactment. As always, ANN will keep you posted. The International Council of Airshows, also known as ICAS, has filed an amicus brief to support the EAA in its suit brought against the FAA. The suit filed by the EAA against the FAA was made to recover charges incurred for FAA air traffic control participation at EAA AirVenture 2013. ICAS claims their organization may be materially affected by a decision in this case. ICAS states that the fees charged by the FAA to the EAA for air traffic control sets a dangerous precedent for nonprofit operators of air shows. The ICAS amicus brief is a lengthy and detailed document. However, its precepts are simple. When the FAA levied charges to control air traffic at EAA AirVenture 2013, they set a precedent for the airshow business that can be far more reaching than the individual action against the EAA. Approximately 75% of airshow conducting organizations in the United States and about 70% of airshow performers are ICAS members. If the FAA is allowed to start charging service fees, as it did with the EAA, without following established guidelines and federal procedures, other airshow events and ICAS members will be negatively affected. Citing miles-wide and miles-deep support for aerospace manufacturing, Washington's federal delegation made their case Monday in a letter to the Boeing company to base the 777X production in Washington state. The state's delegation of 2 senators and 10 representatives told Boeing that when it comes to aerospace, quote, "No state's federal delegation can compare to our enthusiasm and commitment," end quote. The letter states that Washington state is the aerospace capital of the world, and that the delegation is committed to ensuring that the aerospace industry can continue to grow in the state. The letter is a result of Boeing's announcement that it's seeking a production location outside of the Puget Sound area for the Boeing 777X aircraft, after the unions in Washington state turned down a long-term contract offer. As reported by ANN, other states are making competitive bids to bring Boeing's production facilities to their locales. Kansas is pushing hard to get jobs back in its Wichita plants. And Boeing has production facilities in Long Beach, California, that are completing the C-17 production run. Airlines serving small markets are canceling more and more flights these days. And the culprit, according to the carriers, is new regulations boosting flight time requirements for first officers. One such example is Great Lake Airlines, which is supposed to schedule 3 flights a day from Devil's Lake, North Dakota. But sources report that the mayor of Devil's Lake said that the service has been sporadic at best. Out of 90 flights scheduled in November, 35 were canceled. Carriers nationwide are reporting that a new law passed by Congress requiring pilots to build up to 1,500 hours before serving as a first officer on an airline flight has grounded many pilots until that threshold is reached. Flight cancellations, particularly in small markets, seem to be an unintended but foreseeable consequence of the law. According to a 2012 study performed by the University of North Dakota's Aviation Department, the U.S. airline industry faces a shortfall of some 35,000 pilots by 2030. The question becomes, are there enough schools and flight instructors to train the pilots needed? And will the added expense decrease interest in becoming an airline pilot? The Center for Biological Diversity has filed a cease and desist notice with the FAA and State of Arizona's Department of Transportation to stop what it says is the illegal spending of tens of millions of federal dollars on expanding the Grand Canyon National Park Airport. According to a news release, the center says federal environmental and cultural laws require comprehensive studies before committing federal money to such activities. Yet the state's transportation department is using FAA money without doing required studies to expand its airport, despite the fact that there is not enough fresh water to support the expansion and associated development planned near the Grand Canyon. The concern is that the water infrastructure will not support the expansion of the airport. The center plans to initiate legal proceedings if the agencies insist on continuing to put the Grand Canyon at risk. Former astronaut Mark Kelly has been named Director of Flight Crew Operations at Worldview Enterprises. A retired U.S. Navy test pilot and space shuttle commander, Kelly will play a central role in the startup commercial space business, which began taking reservations for its accessible, affordable trips to the edge of space via high-altitude balloon. Worldview will provide a near-space human flight, unlike any other planned suborbital flight experience. Passengers, dubbed Voyagers, will board a luxuriously appointed space-qualified capsule that will be lifted by a high-altitude balloon to 100,000 feet. There, they will float in the edge of space for approximately 2 hours before gliding back to Earth. Component testing of the Worldview capsule is currently underway. Subscale testing will begin early next year, demonstrating the flight characteristics of the Worldview system, compliance with regulatory standards, and the overall integrity of the design. You're watching Airborne. More in a moment.
Since its inception, Redbird Flight Simulations has been dedicated to developing new training technologies and processes in an ongoing effort to make aviation safer, more affordable, and more accessible. Consider Redbird's flagship flight training device, the FMX, a superior quality, full-motion, feature-rich advanced aviation training device priced with real-world flight training organizations in mind. With standard features that are anything but standard, such as wraparound visuals, a fully enclosed cockpit, quick change configurations, scenario-based training compatibility, and of course, an electric motion platform, the FMX serves up a level of realism that is simply unavailable in other training devices on the market. For more information on Redbird flight simulations, the Redbird FMX, and Redbird's entire line of flight training devices, visit www.redbirdflightsimulations.com.
Rebuilding the sport aviation world one aviator at a time. That's A&N's new Aerosports ebook series, your resource guide to the ultimate in aviation adventures. Aerosport will feature the straight skinny on learning and enjoying 16 unique aviation sports, from ultralights and ballooning to aerobatics, gyroplanes and hang gliders to parachuting, home builds and general aviation to RC models. All this and more will be coming soon with the new updatable Aerosport guide for your favorite electronic devices. Get your advance order in now at www.aero-sport.net.
Welcome back. If you'd like to suggest a story for Airborne, Aero-TV, our website, or our podcast, drop us an email to news-by@aero-news.net. The F-18 Hornet community celebrated the 35th anniversary of the aircraft's first flight during a ceremony held at the Rear Admiral William A. Moffett Building atrium at Naval Air Station, Patuxent River, Maryland on December 9th. This makes it the Navy's longest-running tactical aircraft program. Originally designed to replace the F-4 Phantom and the A-7 Corsair II, the FA-18 Hornet took its first flight in 1978. Today, the F-18 platform, including the Hornet, Super Hornet, and EA-18G Growler, operate in 44 Navy and 11 Marine Corps strike fighters and electronic attack squadrons worldwide. Since its maiden voyage 35 years ago, the FA-18 family of aircraft have flown an average nearing 250,000 flight hours per year. The ceremony was followed by a luncheon and tours of the Air Test and Evaluation Squadron facility. Boeing also provided guests the opportunity to fly the FA-18 Super Hornet via its mobile simulator. Air Force officials announced last week the accident investigation results of a July 19th T-38C accident at Sheppard Air Force Base in Texas. The investigation determined the mishap was due to a bird strike that shattered the canopy, which sent fragments through the No. 2 engine, causing engine failure. The shattered canopy also significantly increased the aerodynamic drag of the mishap aircraft. An additional cause was related to actions of the mishap pilot attempts to return to base. After the bird strike, the instructor pilot executed a turn that increased drag on the aircraft, robbing it of badly needed airspeed and lift, which caused the aircraft to enter into an unrecoverable stall. Both pilots safely ejected from the aircraft, suffering non-life-threatening injuries. There were no fatalities or significant damage to civilian property. As an 18-year-old serving in the U.S. Navy in 1941, Walt Schatz, now 90 years old, was credited with shooting down a Japanese airplane during the attack on Pearl Harbor. But when he tried to fly back to Hawaii for the 72nd anniversary of the attack, he found himself bumped from his United Airlines flight. However, United rebooked Schatz on an American flight, and he arrived in time for the ceremony. The good news part of the story doesn't end there, though. The veteran's story of his travel problems hit the social media and went viral prior to his arrival. An ad hoc group made up of mostly service members put together a welcoming committee for Schatz at the airport when he arrived. 71 people were at the airport to greet Schatz, who stopped for several pictures with those who came to greet him. In a television interview, Schatz said, quote, "Everyone was making out like I was a hero, but I'm not really. It was embarrassing in a way, but I liked it," end quote. Well, that's our program. Remember, you can get comprehensive, real-time, 24/7 coverage of the latest aviation and aerospace stories at aero-news.net. And join us again next Tuesday for a new edition of Airborne. I'm Ashley Hale. Thanks for watching.